It was early morning and the city was just waking up. Cars began to roll down the wet streets and the smell of coffee drifted from small shops that had opened their doors for the day. People hurried to work, some with their phones pressed to their ears, others lost in their own thoughts. Among them sat an old woman on the edge of a quiet sidewalk, her back against a cold wall, her hands tucked under a worn blanket. Beside her was a little girl, no older than 4, sitting cross-legged and clutching a small stuffed bear whose fur had long faded. The woman's name was Eleanor, though no one around her knew that. To most, she was just another face in the crowd, one of many people who had no home, no address, no place to belong. Her hair, once dark and full, was now a silver halo that caught the morning light. Her clothes were layered and mismatched, not for style but for warmth. The little girl beside her was her granddaughter, Lily, a child with bright brown eyes and a smile that somehow still found its way through hunger and cold. Every morning, Eleanor woke before the sun. She would gently shake Lily awake, whispering softly so the girl wouldn't be frightened. Together, they would walk the streets looking for a safe corner, a dry spot where they could rest without being told to move. Sometimes they were lucky, finding shelter under a shop's awning. Other nights the wind pushed rain into every open space and they had to huddle close, waiting for the storm to pass. Eleanor had once lived in a small house with a garden full of daisies. She could still picture it in her mind, the kitchen window that looked out onto the yard, the sound of her late husband humming as he fixed the old radio, and the sweet sound of her piano filling the rooms. Music had always been her comfort. It had carried her through love, marriage, loss, and even through the loneliness of old age. But when her daughter, Lily's mother, passed away suddenly, Eleanor's world fell apart. Bills piled up. Her savings disappeared in hospital costs. And slowly, one piece at a time, everything she owned slipped away. Now, her entire life fit into one small shopping cart. Still, she never complained in front of Lily. She would smile, braid the girl's hair with her trembling hands, and tell her stories about angels that watched over them. Lily loved those stories. She didn't understand poverty or hardship. To her, life was just a big adventure with her grandmother. A different bench every night, a new place to explore each morning. As the city grew louder that day, Eleanor tried to stretch her aching legs. Her knees hurt from sleeping on concrete, but she didn't want Lily to see her pain. She gently brushed the dust off the little girl's coat and said, "Let's go find something warm, my darling." They walked toward the square, where people often left half-eaten sandwiches near the trash bins. Eleanor always made sure the food wasn't spoiled before giving any to Lily. The little girl didn't complain, even when all they had was a piece of bread and an apple. She always smiled and said, "Thank you, Granny." Those words made Eleanor's heart both swell and ache at the same time. They found an empty spot near a fountain, where the sun reached the pavement just right. Eleanor laid out a small piece of cardboard for them to sit on. Around them, people passed without a glance. Some looked away quickly, pretending not to see. Others tossed a few coins into the old tin can beside Eleanor's feet. Every sound of a coin dropping was a small reminder, not of pity but of hope. Lily loved to hum while they sat there. Sometimes she would sing little songs she made up, mixing words and sounds in her cheerful, childlike way. Eleanor would listen, her eyes soft and tired, but full of love. "You sound like a bird, my sweet girl," she would whisper, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. One afternoon, as they sat quietly watching pigeons peck at crumbs, a group of students walked by, laughing and carrying coffee cups. One of them dropped a coin into Eleanor's cup and said, "Stay warm, Grandma." The tone wasn't cruel, just casual, careless, but the words stuck in Eleanor's chest. Grandma. Yes, she was a grandmother, but to this world she was only that. An old, nameless woman on the street. That night, the temperature dropped quickly. The city light sparkled beautifully, but the cold was sharp, biting through Eleanor's thin coat. She wrapped Lily tightly in the blanket, holding her close as the child fell asleep on her lap. Every breath Eleanor took was slow and heavy. Her body was tired, but her mind stayed awake, listening to every sound. The passing footsteps, the rustle of paper, the distant hum of cars. In moments like that, she would whisper softly to herself, "Tomorrow will be better." It was a promise she repeated every night, even when she wasn't sure she believed it. The next morning came with the sound of music, faint but clear. Someone was playing a piano nearby. Eleanor looked up, surprised. The sound drifted from the square, gentle notes floating in the air like sunshine breaking through clouds. Lily opened her eyes, smiled, and said, "Granny, that's so pretty." They followed the sound, their small footsteps echoing on the sidewalk. And there it was. An old upright piano painted with colorful flowers standing near the fountain. It looked worn. Some keys chipped, the paint faded, but it was beautiful in its own way. A young man was playing a cheerful tune, his fingers moving easily. People stopped to listen, some recording with their phones, others tapping their feet. When the man finished, the crowd clapped and moved on. The square grew quiet again. Eleanor stood still, staring at the piano. Her fingers twitched slightly, almost as if they remembered something long forgotten. She hadn't touched a piano in years, not since she lost her home. The thought made her heart ache, but Lily noticed her gaze and asked in her soft, curious voice, "Granny, did you ever play?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "A long time ago," she said. "Can you play now?" Lily asked eagerly, her eyes shining. "Oh, my dear, I don't know," Eleanor replied. "It's been so long and these old hands might have forgotten." But Lily tugged gently at her arm. "Please, Granny, just one song." Something in that innocent request stirred something deep inside Eleanor. She looked around. There were a few people sitting on benches, a couple feeding pigeons, but no one paying much attention. Slowly, she walked toward the piano. Her knees trembled, her fingers shook, but she sat down on the worn bench. The keys were cold under her touch. She pressed one, a low, soft note that rang through the air. Then another. Then another. And suddenly the sound felt familiar again. Her fingers began to move, slowly at first, then with more confidence. The tune was simple, a lullaby she used to play for her daughter many years ago. Lily listened in silence, her little hands folded on her lap, her eyes full of wonder. For a moment, the world around them seemed to stop. The city noise faded, the cold air didn't feel as sharp, and the sadness that had followed Eleanor for so long melted away. There was only music, pure, gentle, and full of love. When she finished, she looked down at Lily, who was smiling from ear to ear. "That was beautiful, Granny," the little girl whispered. Eleanor's eyes glistened with tears. She took Lily's small hand and kissed it. "It's our song now," she said softly. As they sat together by the piano, a few passers-by stopped to listen. One woman took a photo, another left a coin on the piano lid. But Eleanor didn't notice. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Lily leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. Eleanor looked at the piano, the people walking by, and the city that had so often turned its back on her. Yet in that moment, she didn't feel invisible. She felt alive. That night, as they found a quiet place to rest, Eleanor closed her eyes and whispered, "Maybe tomorrow I'll play again." And Lily, half asleep, murmured, "Yes, Granny. Tomorrow we'll make more music." The old woman smiled. She didn't know what the next day would bring: hunger, rain, or maybe nothing at all. But somewhere deep inside, a small spark had been lit again. It wasn't just hope. It was purpose. Because music, even when played on broken keys, could still touch hearts, and hers had just begun to play again. The next morning began with a chill that crept through the thin blanket covering Eleanor and Lily. The sound of early buses and footsteps filled the air. The city never really slept, but mornings always felt quieter, almost peaceful. Eleanor slowly sat up, stretching her stiff arms and rubbing her cold hands together. She looked down at Lily, still asleep, her small hand clutching the old stuffed bear. For a moment, Eleanor just watched her, smiling softly. Lily's face always reminded her of her daughter. The same eyes, the same way her lips curved when she dreamed. Sometimes Eleanor would close her eyes and imagine she was back in their old house, the one with the little garden and the white curtains. But when she opened them again, the truth returned. The cracked pavement, the sounds of traffic, and the heavy cart beside her, that was their home now. When Lily woke up, her first words were a sleepy whisper. "Granny, can we go to the piano again today?" Eleanor smiled weakly. "You really liked it, didn't you?" Lily nodded eagerly. It made the air feel happy. Those words stayed with Eleanor as they walked. The air felt happy. Maybe in some strange way it did. Yesterday, when she touched those keys, she felt alive again. Not like a forgotten old woman, but like someone who still had something to give. They made their way back to the city square. The streets were busy already. People rushing to work, children holding their parents' hands, delivery vans honking as they passed. When they reached the fountain, the piano stood there just as before, sunlight glinting off its chipped paint. Someone had placed a small flower on top, perhaps left by a kind stranger. Eleanor hesitated at first. She didn't want to draw too much attention. But Lily, full of excitement, ran ahead and touched the keys, pressing one that made a soft note ring out. "It's still here," she said. "Can you play again, Granny?" Eleanor looked around. A few people were sitting on benches reading newspapers or sipping coffee. No one seemed to mind. Slowly, she walked over, sat down, and placed her hands on the keys again. The first note came out shaky, the second a little clearer. Her fingers were stiff, but her heart remembered the rhythm. She began to play the same song as before, the gentle lullaby she used to hum long ago. Lily stood beside her, eyes wide, swaying slightly to the music. As the melody filled the air, something magical happened again. The noise of the street faded just a little. A few people stopped walking. A child pulled on his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Listen." A man on his phone paused mid-sentence. The music wasn't loud or perfect, but it carried a feeling, something deep, warm and real. Lily started to hum along softly. Her voice was light, pure and sweet. People smiled as they watched her. A little girl beside an old woman sharing something simple and beautiful. Eleanor didn't notice the crowd growing. She just played, her eyes closed, lost in the sound. When she finished, there was silence for a few seconds, then gentle applause. Eleanor looked up, startled. A few people clapped quietly, smiling. Someone dropped a few coins into the open lid of the piano. Eleanor's cheeks flushed. She wasn't used to being seen. One woman stepped forward. "That was beautiful," she said kindly. "Do you come here often?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, I just played for her." She nodded toward Lily. "Well," the woman said, smiling at the little girl, "you should come more often. You made my morning better." The woman walked away, leaving a few bills near the piano. Eleanor stared at them, unsure what to do. She hadn't expected money. For her, playing wasn't about that. It was about remembering who she used to be, someone with a voice. Lily, however, clapped her hands. "See, Granny, people like your music." Eleanor laughed softly. "Maybe they do, my darling. Maybe they do." The rest of the morning passed quietly. A few more people stopped to listen, some taking short videos, others just standing silently. Every note seemed to reach someone's heart, even if only for a moment. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt useful again. She wasn't begging or waiting for kindness. She was giving something instead. When the sun climbed higher, she stopped playing and rested her hands. Lily climbed onto her lap, looking up at her with a grin. "Can we play again tomorrow?" Eleanor smiled and kissed her forehead. "We'll see, sweetheart. My fingers need to rest a little." They spent the afternoon walking through the park, where Lily chased pigeons and laughed every time one flew away. Eleanor watched her, feeling something she hadn't felt in so long, peace. The city didn't seem as harsh that day. Even strangers' faces looked softer, friendlier. As the sky turned orange, they found a spot near a bakery. The warm smell of bread filled the air. The baker, an older man with kind eyes, noticed them sitting by the window. He stepped outside holding a small paper bag. "Here," he said gently. "These are from yesterday. Still good." Eleanor tried to refuse, but he insisted. "Please, you made my wife cry with your music today." She said it reminded her of her mother. Eleanor's eyes welled up as she took the bag. "Thank you," she whispered. Inside were 2 soft rolls. She broke one in half and handed it to Lily. The girl took a big bite and smiled, her cheeks puffed with bread. Eleanor laughed softly, and for a moment the world didn't feel so cruel. That night, as they found a spot near the old church to sleep, Eleanor thought about the day. It had been such a small thing, a few songs, a few smiles, but it had changed everything. She realized that the piano wasn't just an instrument. It was a bridge, a way to connect with people again. Lily cuddled against her, whispering, "Granny, when you play, it feels like the stars are listening." Eleanor smiled in the dark. "Maybe they are, my love. Maybe they are." The next few days became a quiet rhythm. Every morning, after finding something to eat, they went back to the square. Eleanor played softly and Lily sang. More and more people began to stop and listen. Some left coins. Others left small notes of thanks. One man even brought them a thermos of hot chocolate, saying, "My son watches your videos every day." "You've made a lot of people smile," Eleanor blinked.
Videos?
"Yes," the man said. "Someone filmed you two playing last week. It's all over the internet." Eleanor didn't really understand. She'd never used a phone, let alone watched videos online. But she saw the man's expression, kind and sincere, and she knew it must be something good. That evening, as the last light of the sun faded, Eleanor played one last song. Her fingers moved slowly, lovingly, as Lily leaned against her side, humming softly. When the final note drifted away, Eleanor looked around. The square was quiet again, but she could feel something different in the air, a warmth that wasn't there before. Later, as they walked away, a stranger approached them. He was carrying a camera and wore a warm coat. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said politely. "I'm from a local news channel. We'd love to share your story." "People have been moved by your music," Eleanor froze. "Our story?" "Yes," he said with a smile. "You and your granddaughter. You've touched many hearts." She didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to attention. For so long, she'd been invisible, blending into the background of city life. The thought of people knowing her name, her face, cries, it frightened her a little. But then she looked at Lily, who was holding her hand tightly, eyes wide with excitement. "Will people hear our music?" Lily asked. The man nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. Everyone will hear it." Eleanor hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right," she said softly. "If it brings a little kindness into the world, then yes." That night she couldn't sleep. The air was cold, but her thoughts were warm. She kept thinking about what the man said, that people had been moved by her music. It seemed almost impossible. She had lost everything, her home, her comfort, her past. Yet somehow, through one old piano, she had found a way to give something back. As Lily slept beside her, Eleanor whispered to the night sky, "Thank you." She didn't know who she was thanking. Perhaps the kind strangers, perhaps her daughter's memory, or maybe the heavens above. But deep in her heart, she felt something she hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope. And while the city lights twinkled around them, Eleanor knew that tomorrow, she and Lily would return to that piano again. Because every time she played, she wasn't just making music. She was reminding the world, and herself, that love and kindness could still be heard, even from the quietest corners of the street. The morning sun shone brightly over the square. The fountain sparkled, and the air carried the faint smell of roasted coffee from the nearby cafe. Eleanor and Lily were already there, standing in front of the piano that had now become their little stage. Over the past week, the square had changed for them. It wasn't just a place to sit or pass time anymore. It was where they belonged, even if just for a few hours a day. The people who came and went began to recognize them. The gentle old woman with kind eyes and the little girl with a bright smile who always sang beside her. That morning, as Eleanor lifted the lid of the piano, she noticed something that made her pause. Someone had tied a small red ribbon around one of the legs of the piano. Attached to it was a note that read, "Thank you for bringing beauty back to this city." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she held the note. She looked around, wondering who might have left it, but everyone nearby just smiled politely. Lily tugged at her coat, her voice soft and full of curiosity. "What does it say, Granny?" "It says, 'Thank you,'" Eleanor whispered, her eyes misty. "Can you imagine that, my love? Someone thanking us," Lily giggled. "But we were just playing music." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with warmth. "Sometimes, my darling, a little bit of music is all people need." She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. The melody started soft and slow, like a gentle breeze. Lily stood beside her, humming quietly, her little body swaying in rhythm. Within minutes, the sound of the piano floated across the square. People began to slow their steps. Some stopped completely. A young couple stood hand in hand listening. A group of children sat cross-legged near the fountain. Even an old man with a walking cane smiled as he tapped his foot. Then Lily began to sing. Her voice was light and clear, innocent, but filled with feeling. The words didn't belong to any song. She was simply making them up as she went, singing about sunshine, about her granny's hands, about dreams. Eleanor kept playing, matching her rhythm to Lily's soft tune. The music wrapped around them like a warm blanket, and for a while, The busy square felt like another world. When the song ended, silence filled the air. Then one by one, people clapped. Some even cheered softly. Eleanor looked up, surprised. She hadn't noticed how many had gathered. There must have been more than 30 people standing around the piano. Someone shouted, "Play another one." Eleanor chuckled nervously. "Oh, I don't know if these old fingers can manage 2 songs in a row." But the crowd waited smiling, and Lily looked up at her expectantly. "Please, Granny. Just one more," and so she played again. This time it was a brighter tune, something cheerful and full of life. Lily clapped her hands in time with the music. A few children joined in, laughing and dancing near the fountain. The moment was pure, full of joy, and so human that even strangers who had come there with worries seemed to forget them for a while. A man holding a camera began to film quietly. He wasn't the only one. A few others took short videos on their phones, but Eleanor didn't notice. She was too lost in the music. The same music that had once filled her home years ago, now echoing through the open square. When the performance ended, people came forward, dropping coins and small notes into the old tin can that sat beside her. A woman in a bright yellow scarf bent down and said, "You two are wonderful. Thank you for reminding us of what matters." Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. "We're just happy to share a bit of music," the woman smiled. "You've shared more than that, dear. You've shared love." That night, as the sky turned deep blue, Eleanor and Lily sat together near the park with the small bag of food someone had given them. They shared it quietly, a sandwich, an apple, and a cup of hot tea. Lily looked up at the stars and said softly, "Granny, do you think Mommy can hear us when we play?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "Yes, my love. I think she can, and I think she's very proud of you." The little girl leaned her head on Eleanor's shoulder, and the old woman wrapped an arm around her, her heart full of both love and ache. The next day, something unexpected happened. When they arrived at the square, there were already people waiting, more than usual. Some carried flowers, others held signs that said things like, "Play again, Piano Granny," and "We love you and Lily." Eleanor blinked in confusion. "Goodness, what is all this?" A young man stepped forward, smiling. "You're famous. Haven't you seen the videos?" "Videos?" she repeated. "Yes. Someone filmed you and your granddaughter. It's all over the internet. Millions of people have watched it." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Millions?" He nodded. "Everyone's been touched by your music. People are calling you the street pianist grandma. There are comments from all over the world," Lily giggled. "Granny, we're famous." Eleanor laughed softly, shaking her head. "Famous. Imagine that." People clapped as she sat down at the piano again. Some even chanted softly, "Play, play." The noise made Lily giggle again, and Eleanor couldn't help but smile. All right, she said gently, placing her hands on the keys. "But this time you must sing with me, my darling." And they began. The melody filled the air again, stronger than ever before. This time it wasn't just music, it was a story, a message of love, of hope, of family. The crowd grew quiet. Some people closed their eyes. Others held their phones up, capturing the moment. But no camera could truly capture what was happening, the deep emotion that passed between the players and the listeners. Halfway through the song, Eleanor looked up and saw tears in the eyes of a few strangers. One woman wiped her cheeks, another man stood still, his hand over his heart. It was as if the music had reached a part of them words never could. When the song ended, the applause was thunderous. People cheered and clapped, some calling out words of love and gratitude. Eleanor stood slowly, overwhelmed. She had never imagined such kindness, such connection. Afterward, a young woman approached her with a kind smile. "Ma'am," she said, "I work for a music foundation nearby. We'd like to help you. Maybe find you and your granddaughter a place to stay and a real piano to practice on." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that for us?" "Of course," the woman said warmly. "You've already given us something priceless." That evening, as they walked away from the square, Lily held Eleanor's hand tightly. "Granny, does this mean we don't have to sleep outside anymore?" Eleanor looked down at her, her voice trembling. "Maybe, my love. Maybe soon." They stopped by the fountain one last time that day. The water shimmered in the moonlight and the piano stood quietly like an old friend. Eleanor touched it gently. "Thank you," she whispered to it. Lily tilted her head. "You're thanking the piano?" Eleanor chuckled softly. "Yes, sweetheart, because it gave us back our song, and maybe even our home. The little girl smiled, and they walked hand in hand down the quiet street. The night air was cool, but it no longer felt lonely. The sound of the piano still echoed faintly in Eleanor's heart. As they found a small corner near the park to rest, Lily snuggled close, whispering, "Granny, when I grow up, I want to play the piano too." Eleanor stroked her hair gently. "You will, my darling, and you'll play it beautifully." She looked up at the stars and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long time, her heart wasn't heavy. It was full of gratitude, full of music, full of love. Somewhere out there, people she'd never met were listening to her song, feeling her story, and sharing her hope. She had been invisible for so many years, but now, the world was finally seeing her, not as a homeless woman, but as a grandmother who played music with her heart. And as she drifted off to sleep beside her granddaughter, Eleanor smiled to herself. The city, once cold and distant, now felt warm, and deep in her soul she knew this was only the beginning. The next few days felt like a dream to Eleanor and Lily. Everything around them had changed. The same streets that once looked gray and lonely now seemed full of color. Every morning when they reached the square, people were already waiting near the piano. Some brought flowers, others brought small gifts for Lily, a scarf, a toy, even a tiny pink hat that made her giggle every time she wore it. Eleanor was overwhelmed by the kindness. She wasn't used to being noticed, much less loved by strangers. For years she had lived quietly, blending into the background, but now people smiled when they saw her. Some called her Grandma of Music. Others just waved and said, "Good morning." One afternoon, a man from a local news channel arrived. He was kind and soft-spoken, holding a camera and a microphone. He said, "We'd like to tell your story, ma'am. Everyone has been talking about you and your granddaughter. Would that be all right?" Eleanor hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted the world to know everything. But then she looked down at Lily, whose face was glowing with excitement. "Can we, Granny?" Lily asked. "Please?" Eleanor smiled gently. "All right, my darling. We'll share our story." The man filmed them as they played their favorite song. The air was crisp and calm, and as the music spread, people gathered again. Lily hummed along while Eleanor's fingers danced slowly over the keys. It was simple, beautiful, and full of feeling. Afterward, the reporter asked softly, "How long have you been playing here?" Eleanor thought for a moment. "Not very long," she said. "We found the piano by accident. But maybe it was meant to happen. It reminded me who I am. And what does music mean to you?" he asked. She smiled faintly, her eyes shining. "Music is the one thing that never left me, even when life took everything else." The man nodded quietly, clearly moved. "That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing." The video went online that same evening. By the next morning, it had spread faster than anyone expected. People from all over the country, even from other parts of the world, had shared it. The comments were full of love. "She plays from her heart." That little girl's smile made my day. They reminded me that kindness still exists. Eleanor didn't fully understand what it meant to go viral, but she could feel it in the way people reacted when she and Lily arrived at the square. Some came just to listen. Others brought warm food, blankets, or letters. One day, a man wearing a neat coat approached her with a big smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Daniel. I work with a local community foundation. We'd like to offer you a place to stay." Eleanor froze. "A place to stay?" "Yes," he said kindly. "A small apartment. It's warm, clean, and safe. You and your granddaughter shouldn't have to sleep outside anymore. The people who saw your story donated to help you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Daniel said softly. "You've already given so much. Your music has touched thousands. Now it's time for others to give back." Lily clapped her hands excitedly. "Granny, we can have a home again." Eleanor nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped her eyes. "Yes, my love. We can." That evening, they were taken to a small apartment near the park. It wasn't big, just one bedroom, a kitchen, and a window that looked out onto the street. But to them, it felt like a palace. The first thing Eleanor did was turn on the light. The room glowed softly, and she smiled as she looked around. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Lily ran around, touching everything with excitement. "We have a bed." "And a table. And look, Granny, there's a bathtub." Eleanor laughed, her heart full. She hadn't heard Lily laugh like that in so long. For the first time in years, they slept on a real bed, warm and safe. Eleanor lay awake for a while, watching Lily sleep peacefully beside her. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from sadness but from pure gratitude. The next morning, she made a small breakfast with some bread and fruit the foundation had provided. As they ate, Lily looked out the window and said, "Granny, do you think the piano misses us?" Eleanor chuckled. "Maybe. Shall we go visit it today?" Lily nodded eagerly. "Yes, let's play our song again." When they arrived at the square, something new was waiting for them. The same piano, but cleaned and freshly painted. Someone had decorated it with bright blue and gold colors and written across the top, "The Music of Love, dedicated to Granny and Lily." Eleanor gasped. "Oh my goodness." Lily clapped and ran to touch it. "They made it so pretty, Granny." A small crowd began to form. People were smiling, waving, and calling out greetings. "Welcome back," someone shouted. "We missed you." Eleanor sat down and ran her fingers gently across the keys. "Shall we begin, my darling?" Lily nodded and stood beside her. Together they played once more. The sound was richer now, fuller, as if the piano itself was alive with joy. The crowd swayed to the rhythm, some wiping away tears. A man in the back whispered, "They're not just playing music, they're healing hearts." When the last note faded, the applause was loud and long. A few people came forward with flowers, others with letters. One woman handed Eleanor a small card that said, "You reminded me to call my mother again. Thank you." That night, when they returned home, Lily fell asleep instantly, tired from all the excitement. Eleanor sat by the window looking out at the city lights. She thought about how quickly life had changed. For so many years she had lived in silence and shadows. Now the world was listening. Over the following weeks, things continued to get better. The foundation helped her get an identification card and some basic supplies. A nearby music school invited Eleanor and Lily to visit. The school director, an elderly man with gentle eyes, told her, "We'd be honored if you would play for our students, maybe even teach them a little." Eleanor smiled shyly. "Oh, I'm not a teacher." He shook his head. "You teach with your heart. That's more than enough." She agreed to come once a week. Lily would sit on the floor with other children, listening as her grandmother played. Sometimes the little girl would sing softly, and the entire class would join in. It became a beautiful weekly tradition. Soon the story of the street piano granny and her granddaughter appeared on television again. This time the headline read, "From Sidewalks to Stage, a Melody of Hope." Eleanor couldn't believe it. She wasn't chasing fame. All she wanted was to make people feel something. And now that's exactly what her music was doing. One afternoon, while she was teaching, Daniel from the foundation visited again. "We have another surprise for you," he said. He led Eleanor and Lily outside where a small truck was parked. Inside was a shiny new upright piano covered with a white cloth. When they removed it, Lily gasped. "It's beautiful." "It's for you," Daniel said with a smile. "A gift from all the people who donated after seeing your story." Eleanor covered her mouth in disbelief. "For us?" "Yes, so you can keep playing, at home where it's warm." Eleanor touched the piano gently, her eyes wet. "I don't know how to thank you," Daniel smiled kindly. "You already have." That night, when the piano was set up in their small living room, Eleanor sat before it, her fingers trembling slightly as she played the first note. The sound was soft, pure, and full of life. Lily sat beside her, her small hands resting on the keys. Together they played the song that had started everything, the simple lullaby that had once echoed across the streets. As the music filled their tiny apartment, Eleanor closed her eyes. Memories washed over her, her old home, her daughter's laughter, the years of loneliness and the kindness of strangers who had helped them. It all blended into one long, beautiful melody. When the last note faded, Lily looked up and said softly, "Granny, this feels like a dream." Eleanor smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. "It is, my darling. But sometimes dreams do come true." The piano had given them more than music. It had given them a second chance, a way to start over. And as the night grew quiet, Eleanor realized something she hadn't dared to believe before. She wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed were peaceful and full of music. Every morning, the soft sound of the piano drifted out from the small apartment window. People who passed by would slow down just to listen. Some smiled. Others stood quietly, letting the music carry them away. It became a part of the neighborhood, a gentle reminder that even in simple moments, beauty could exist. Eleanor's fingers moved slower now, but her heart was still full of life. She played for Lily every evening after dinner. The songs were different each time, some cheerful, others tender and slow. No matter what she played, Lily always clapped at the end and hugged her tightly, saying, "That was beautiful, Granny." Eleanor would laugh softly and reply, "You always say that, my love." "That's because it's always true," Lily would answer, her eyes sparkling. Their bond grew stronger with every passing day. The little girl loved to sit by the piano, pressing random keys and pretending to play like her grandmother. Sometimes she'd hum a tune she made up herself. It didn't matter if the notes were off. Eleanor always encouraged her. "Music doesn't have to be perfect, sweetheart. It just has to come from your heart." The small apartment soon filled with visitors. Neighbors came to listen, sometimes bringing cookies or tea. The people who had once been strangers now felt like family. They would sit on the floor, close their eyes, and let the music wash over them. One afternoon, the same reporter who had first filmed Eleanor and Lily returned. "You've become quite famous," he said with a warm smile. "People all over the world still talk about you." Eleanor laughed softly. "Famous? I'm just a grandmother who likes to play the piano." He shook his head. "You're more than that. You reminded people what kindness and love sound like." After he left, Eleanor sat quietly by the window for a long time. She watched Lily draw pictures on the floor. Pianos, flowers, smiling faces. Her heart swelled with pride. "She's growing so fast," she thought. "And she's happy. That's all that matters." But as the months passed, Eleanor began to feel her body slowing down. Some days her hands trembled too much to play. Other days she felt tired even before noon. She tried not to let Lily see, but children always noticed. "Granny, are you okay?" Lily asked one evening, her voice full of concern. Eleanor smiled gently. "I'm all right, my darling. Just a little tired. Old bones, you know." Lily frowned. "You need to rest. I can play for you today," and she did. Sitting on the small wooden bench, Lily placed her hands on the keys and began to play the little tune her grandmother had taught her. The notes were soft and uneven, but full of love. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the sound fill the room. Tears slipped down her cheeks. When Lily finished, she turned and asked, "Did you like it?" Eleanor opened her eyes and whispered, "It was the most beautiful song I've ever heard." That night, as they prepared for bed, Eleanor took Lily's hand. "Promise me something, sweetheart." "What is it, Granny?" "Promise me you'll never stop playing." "No matter what happens, keep music in your heart. It will guide you even when I can't." Lily looked at her with wide eyes. "But you'll always be here, right?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes soft and full of love. "I'll always be with you, in every song and every note. Just listen closely and you'll hear me." Lily nodded slowly. "I promise." Time went on and the seasons changed. The city outside kept moving, but inside their little apartment, life stayed calm and full of melody. Every morning, Lily practiced her piano lessons, and every evening she and her grandmother played together. Then, one quiet winter morning, the music stopped. Eleanor had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her hands folded gently beside her. The world outside carried on, but inside that tiny apartment, a piece of magic had gone still. When Lily woke up and realized what had happened, she didn't cry right away. She sat by the piano, her small fingers tracing the keys her grandmother had loved so much. For a long time, she didn't say a word. Then she whispered softly, "I'll keep my promise, Granny." The neighbors gathered to help. They brought flowers and kind words, and many of them cried. The piano, which had once filled the air with so much joy, now stood silent. But Lily didn't stop playing. A few days later, she returned to the same square where it all began. The old public piano was still there, bright and colorful. People recognized her instantly. The little girl who had once played beside her grandmother. She climbed up on the bench and began to play the same melody they used to share. Her small hands moved carefully, and though the notes trembled at first, they soon grew stronger. People stopped, just like before. Some remembered the old woman and wiped away tears. When Lily finished, a hush filled the air. Then someone started clapping, and soon the whole crowd joined in. She looked up at the sky and smiled. "That was for you, Granny," she whispered. Years went by. Lily grew up, but she never forgot that promise. She kept playing every single day. Music became her way of speaking to the world, a language she had learned from love, not lessons. By the time she turned 18, she had been accepted into a music academy. The teachers were amazed by her talent. "You play with so much feeling," one of them said. "Who taught you?" Lily smiled softly. "My grandmother." She practiced every day, remembering how Eleanor's hands used to move so gracefully across the keys. Sometimes she still felt like her grandmother was sitting right beside her, nodding in approval. When she gave her first concert, the hall was packed. The lights dimmed and she walked to the piano in a simple white dress. She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play the same tune that had once echoed through the streets, the lullaby her grandmother had written long ago. The audience sat in silence. The melody was gentle and full of emotion, each note carrying a story of hardship, kindness, and love that never faded. As she played, Lily could almost hear her grandmother's voice whispering, "I'm proud of you, my darling." When the final note faded, the room was still for a moment. Then the applause came, loud and full of feeling. People stood up, wiping tears from their eyes. Many of them had seen that viral video years ago, the one of the old woman and her granddaughter playing in the street. After the concert, reporters came to speak with her. One of them asked, "That song you played, it touched everyone in the room. What does it mean to you?" Lily smiled through her tears. "It's the sound of home," she said softly. "It's the sound of love that never dies." From that day on, she traveled to many places playing her grandmother's songs. Each time she sat at a piano, she felt the same warmth she had felt as a little girl sitting beside her in the cold city square. People all over the world came to know her story. The girl who once played on the streets with her homeless grandmother, now filling concert halls with music that came from the heart. But Lily never let fame change her. She always kept that small upright piano in her home, the one that had been gifted to them years ago. On quiet nights, she would sit by it, close her eyes, and play softly. The melody would float through the window just like before. Neighbors sometimes stopped and listened, smiling to themselves. Some said, "It feels like the old lady is still here." And in a way she was, because every time Lily played, the spirit of her grandmother lived on, in every note, in every pause, in every breath of music. The same music that once brought strangers together now reached across the world, reminding people of something simple and true. Love doesn't fade, even when the person is gone. It lives in the things they leave behind, and a song, a smile, a memory. And for Lily, it lived in the piano keys, glowing softly under her fingertips, just as they had that first day when everything began. As the final tune ended one quiet evening, she looked out the window at the city lights below and whispered, "We did it, Granny. We really did." Then she began to play again, her music carrying gently into the night, a song that never truly ended.